My wife disrespected my late mother while opening Black Friday boxes, so I returned everything, walked away, and took her credit with me. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and this all started on what was supposed to be just another Black Friday morning. The house was still cold, still quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I walked into the living room and found Alicia sitting cross-legged on the rug, surrounded, no, buried, by towers of unopened delivery boxes. It looked like a warehouse had exploded in our home. She was humming, slicing tape open with the same excitement a kid has while unwrapping birthday gifts. "Babe, did you order all of this?" I asked, stepping over a stack labeled Luxury Home Decor. My voice came out softer than I intended, because I already knew the answer. She didn't even look up. "Come on, it's tradition," she laughed, tearing into another box like she was on a game show. Black Friday is basically my Super Bowl. I felt that familiar discomfort in my chest, the kind you pretend not to feel because addressing it leads to an argument. I tried to swallow it. After all, she looked so happy. But then she opened a flatter box and pulled out bubble wrap, tossing it aside carelessly. Something wooden clattered against the floor. I recognized the sound instantly. "Alicia," I started, moving toward her. She unwrapped the item lazily, then rolled her eyes. "Ugh, this again? When are we getting rid of your mom's crap?" She said it like it was nothing, like it was trash. Like my mother, who died 2 years ago, was an inconvenience she kept tripping over. My breath left my body for a second. The photo frame, my mom's last birthday gift to me, was sitting sideways on the rug, the glass catching the morning light. I waited for Alicia to realize what she'd said, to take it back, to look at me, but she just moved on to another box. I went completely silent, staring at that frame like it was the only real thing in the room. I didn't say anything right away, but something cracked in me that morning. I picked up the photo frame after Alicia tossed it aside, and as my fingers traced the worn wooden edges, memories of my mom came flooding in, sharp, vivid, almost painful in their clarity. My mother was the kind of woman who lived quietly but loved loudly. She never had much, but somehow she always made what she'd feel like enough. At Christmas, while other parents splurged on gadgets and shiny toys, she'd sit for hours knitting scarves or stitching little stuffed animals because she said handmade gifts carry the heartbeat of the person who created them. I used to think she said that to save money. Now I know it was because love was her currency when money wasn't. She was widowed when I was 9, worked 2 jobs, days at the diner, nights cleaning offices, but still managed to be the mom who showed up. She'd be exhausted, smelling like coffee and disinfectant, but she'd sit beside me while I did homework, humming softly, asking about my day. She never complained, never made me feel like a burden. She taught me to appreciate small, quiet things. The way fresh bread smells, the way sunlight hits a kitchen table in the morning, the importance of saying thank you, even when no one else does. Alicia was the opposite. She came from a family that treated money like air, so normal, so constant, they barely noticed it. She used to joke about not being poor anymore after we got married. I laughed with her the first few times, chalking it up to differences in upbringing. But after a while, each joke felt like a tiny sting, like she was mocking a place in me that was still tender. And that photo frame she dismissed like it was junk. That was one of the last gifts my mom ever gave me before cancer took her. She picked it out on her final birthday, her hands trembling, but her smile steady. I never thought Alicia would be perfect, but I never expected cruelty. At least, not like that. Holding that photo frame took me further back than I expected. Back to the early days with Alicia. when the red flags were tiny enough for me to pretend they were quirks instead of warnings. I remember the first time she made fun of my thrift store sweater. We were standing in line for coffee, and she tugged on my sleeve with a wrinkled nose, saying, "Babe, this looks like something a high school English teacher would wear." She laughed, light and teasing, and I forced myself to laugh with her even though it stung. I told myself she was just being playful. Whenever we visited my childhood home, the place where my mother raised me with more heart than money, Alicia would step inside and immediately say something like, "God, it smells old," or, "How did you survive growing up here?" She'd say it half jokingly, but each comment carved a tiny line of shame into me. Still, I swallowed it, because she had this magnetic charm, a brightness that made people gravitate to her. I thought maybe she loved me, because I wasn't like the men she grew up around. She used to say I grounded her. I believed her. We bonded over loss, too. She told me she had a strained, cold relationship with her own parents, that she never felt understood by them. I took that at face value because it made us feel like two broken pieces that somehow fit together. Two people who knew what it meant to feel unseen. But then we got engaged, and suddenly the facade cracked. Wedding planning became a battlefield. Every detail, every cost, every choice turned into a fight. She wanted the most expensive venue, the flashiest decor, the kind of wedding you only see in celebrity magazines. I kept trying to explain that it didn't feel like us, but she'd respond, "Well, maybe this is who I am. Maybe you just don't get it." Looking back now, I should have seen this version of her long before Black Friday. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were just easier to ignore when love was still blinding me. The wedding was the first time I felt like a prop in my own life. Alicia had a vision, and I was just there to make it look complete. From the start, I tried to be involved, suggesting things that felt more personal, meaningful. I wanted to get married in the small park near my mom's old neighborhood. Alicia laughed. "What are we, teenagers eloping in the woods?" Then came the dress, the venue, the flowers. Everything spiraled into five-figure choices. Every time I hesitated about cost, she'd kiss my cheek and say, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment, babe. Don't cheapen it." The worst was when I asked if we could pin my mom's gold locket inside her bouquet, just something small, something to feel like she was there with us. Alicia blinked, then said flatly, "It doesn't match my dress." Like it was an accessory, not a memory. I remember standing there, holding that tiny piece of my mother in my palm, realizing that even grief had no space in her version of the day. I told myself to let it go. I thought I was keeping the peace. I didn't realize I was erasing myself, piece by piece. After the wedding, we moved into a sleek, modern condo. Her parents paid most of the down payment from a trust fund they started when she was born. She loved it. White walls, cold marble floors, not a single item that wasn't brand new or trendy. My books stayed in boxes. My mom's crocheted blanket got folded and put in a drawer, so it wouldn't mess up the vibe. My entire past started to feel like clutter she tolerated. But that morning, when she tossed my mom's photo frame like it was trash, something clicked. I realized just how far I'd drifted from who I used to be, how much I'd given up just to keep things smooth, and how this marriage wasn't built on love or memory. It was built on image. She laughed. That's what hit me first. Not the words, not the careless motion, but the laugh. Alicia tossed the box like it was just another useless Amazon package and let out this breezy chuckle that cut through the room like a blade. I bent down and picked up the frame, brushing off a streak of dust with my thumb. My chest felt tight, like I had to physically hold my breath to stop something inside me from splintering. "Alicia, I said quietly, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "Do you know what this is?" She didn't even pause as she opened another box. "Yeah, your mom's old junk. Let's finally clear it out and make space for new things, yeah?" She said it like it was helpful advice, like we were talking about broken holiday lights or expired coupons. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the frame, wooden, hand-carved, edges slightly faded. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, was a note that simply read, "For when I'm gone, but you still need to feel seen." It was her last birthday gift to me. Her hands had been shaking when she wrapped it. Her voice was already raspy from the treatments, but she still smiled that day, still insisted on wrapping it herself. I looked back at Alicia, who was now ripping open a box of kitchen gadgets she didn't need, and I said it. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I said something real. That's the last gift she ever gave me. She finally turned around, met my eyes, and without missing a beat, she said, "Well, you need to move on eventually." That moment didn't just sting, it hollowed me out. Because it wasn't forgetfulness. It was something colder. It was disrespect dressed up as practicality. And in that instant, I wasn't sure who I was more angry at, her or myself for letting it get this far. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything, I didn't even slam the door. I just stood up, holding that frame like it might shatter with one more careless touch, and walked away. Alicia didn't follow. She probably assumed I was sulking, maybe planning to cool off and come back with some weak apology for overreacting. But I wasn't angry in the way she'd come to expect. This wasn't a flare-up. This was something deeper, slower, irreversible. I locked the bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, the frame resting in my lap. I turned it over and read her handwriting again. "For when I'm gone, but you still need to feel seen." I traced each letter with my finger like I could summon her voice back. I imagined her sitting in the hospital, thin and pale, smiling at me through pain she never let define her. She had so little left to give, and she still chose to leave behind something that reminded me who I was. And I wondered, would she even recognize me now? The man who stood quietly while his wife mocked her memory, who let her crocheted blanket get stuffed into a drawer, who kept compromising pieces of himself until all that was left was an echo. I stood up and started walking the condo like a stranger. Our home was polished and white and cold. My books were gone. My mom's old cast-iron skillet had been replaced by some aesthetic set Alicia saw on Instagram. Nothing smelled like memories. Nothing looked like love. It was all curated, sterile, expensive. I realized something then. This place was never mine. It was hers, her style, her rules, her idea of what life should look like. I was just the man who paid the credit card bills and smiled for the photos. And in that quiet, undeniable moment, I knew I was living in someone else's castle. Not a home. It's funny how power doesn't always look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it comes in the form of a signature. Your name on a piece of plastic that someone else gets to swipe. A few months into our marriage, Alicia brought it up over brunch one day, casually, like it was no big deal. "Babe, I've been thinking," she said, sipping her mimosa. "My credit's a little thin. Nothing bad, just not much history. Would you mind putting a few cards in your name for me? It'll help build mine. I'll handle all the payments, I swear." I said yes, because that's what you do when you trust someone, when you think you're building a life together and not just padding theirs. At first, it was fine. Then I started getting small notifications. Late fees, interest charges, minimum payments missed by a few days. I'd ask her about them, and she'd wave it off. "I'll take care of it, it's not a big deal." Then came the packages. Constant daily deliveries. Spa kits, designer shoes, luxury candles. Alicia was always treating herself for something. A long day, a new milestone, a Tuesday. The one time I tried to bring up budgeting, gently, like I was walking across glass, I'll never forget her response. She laughed. "Oh, babe, that's what broke people worry about. We're fine." We weren't fine. I wasn't fine. So I started tracking things on my own. Quiet spreadsheets, receipts, login histories. I listed out every card, every account, every balance that was legally tied to my name. And that morning, while she tore open boxes like it was Christmas, I sat in the bedroom staring at my laptop. Debt I never agreed to. Credit scores I'd worked years to build. Risk I carried for her lifestyle. And something inside me solidified. I didn't know where this was going yet, but I knew I wasn't going to be the one paying for someone else's version of happiness anymore. There's a strange kind of clarity that hits when you realize you're done. Not just tired, not frustrated. Done. I walked back into the living room, where the chaos still sat like a shrine to Alicia's impulses. Boxes stacked on the rug, receipts half crumpled, packaging foam spilling out like entrails. It looked like luxury had thrown up in our house. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the drawer and started slicing open the rest of the boxes. Not out of anger, out of intention. One by one, I pulled out their contents, cross-checking names, vendors, receipts. Most were from the same few online retailers. Thankfully, ones with generous return policies. I opened a tab on my laptop, logged into her accounts, most of which, ironically, used my email, and began initiating returns. Shoes that had never been worn. Skincare she already had 3 versions of. A robotic vacuum we didn't need for a condo with no carpet. Thousands of dollars worth of treats. I moved like I was performing a ritual. Each barcode scanned, each label printed, each refund initiated felt like peeling back a layer of her hold on me. Halfway through, Alicia walked in, holding a smoothie and scrolling her phone. "What the hell are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharp, eyes wide as she saw the mess. I didn't stop moving. "I'm returning this stuff," I said calmly. "You don't need any of it." She scoffed. "Excuse me?" I looked up and met her eyes. "You already have what you want. Yourself." Her mouth dropped open slightly. "Wow. Okay, dramatic much? You're really having a meltdown over a photo frame?" I didn't answer. I just kept scanning barcodes and printing return slips. Because I wasn't just returning boxes. I was returning to myself. And this time, no refund was needed. There was one box I almost missed, tucked behind the TV stand, sealed tighter than the rest. I only noticed it because the shipping label caught my eye. It wasn't addressed to either of us. Different name, different address. Same return address, though. Alicia's favorite luxury department store. Curiosity tugged harder than hesitation, and I pulled it open. Inside were 2 high-end men's colognes, both absurdly expensive and still sealed in gold-embossed packaging. Beneath them were 3 designer button-ups, crisp and folded perfectly. Not my size, not even close. There was a handwritten note from the store's personal shopper. "Hope he loves these. Thank you for your loyalty, Alicia." I checked the receipt. Alicia's email, Alicia's payment method. But the shipping address was not our condo. It belonged to someone named Damien K. I froze. I knew that name. It was her personal trainer, the one she always joked about, the one who motivated her to be her best self. The same guy she insisted I didn't need to worry about because he's literally paid to care about women's bodies. I stared at the contents of the box like it might rearrange itself into something less damning. When she walked back into the room a few minutes later, I didn't even bother setting the trap. I just turned the box around and asked, "Why is this going to Damien?" She blinked like she'd just walked into a pop quiz. Then she laughed, nervous, too fast. "Oh my God, it's not what you think." I tilted my head. "That's what they always say, right before it's exactly what I think." Her face dropped. She opened her mouth again, but I raised a hand, because right then I realized something chilling. This wasn't about a broken frame anymore. This was about a broken marriage. And I had just unboxed the truth. Alicia sat down on the edge of the coffee table, arms folded, like she was the one owed an explanation. "Okay," she said slowly, like she was rehearsing in real time. "Look, I've been emotionally close with Damien for a while, but that doesn't mean I've cheated on you." I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just waited, for honesty or for her to run out of excuses. She sighed. "He just gets me. He understands the life I want, the things I care about. He's not constantly dragging around this nostalgia." There was a pause where something heavy passed between us, like a storm cloud neither of us wanted to name. I asked quietly, "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't answer right away, just looked down, fiddled with the hem of her sweatshirt, then shrugged. "Not in a way that matters." Not in a way that matters. That's when I knew the marriage wasn't just broken. It had been dead for a long time. I just hadn't noticed I was the only one still trying to breathe life into it. "You were always too attached to the past," she added, like it was a flaw. "Your mom this, your childhood that. It's exhausting. Sometimes I felt like I was married to your grief." Her words landed like acid in my chest, because I had spent years trying to preserve my mom's memory without letting it drown the life I was building with Alicia. I thought honoring her could coexist with loving someone new. But Alicia never saw my grief as sacred. She saw it as clutter, as a burden, as something to clear out, just like the photo frame. I stood there, surrounded by return labels, empty boxes and the unmistakable weight of betrayal, and I made a quiet promise to myself. I lost my mom once. I won't lose myself again. I don't remember feeling angry, not in the way movies show it. No smashing plates or screaming into pillows. Just a steady, cold resolve that settled into my bones like winter. It was the kind of clarity that shows up when you finally stop begging someone to treat you right and start protecting what's left of yourself. I sat down at my desk and opened every financial account I had. Froze my credit. Canceled every card Alicia had ever convinced me to open in my name. Called the banks and walked them through what had happened. Unauthorized purchases, misused cards, suspicious shipping addresses. I wasn't dramatic. I was detailed. I submitted fraud reports where I could and made sure she couldn't do more damage under my name. Then I moved to my savings. Transferred everything I'd quietly stashed away into a separate private account. I'd been slowly setting it aside for months. Not because I expected betrayal, but because something deep down had started whispering that I might need a parachute one day. That day had come. I continued printing return labels, taping boxes shut. Over $8,000 worth of items, clothes, gadgets, decor, shoes, vanished back into packaging. Some things hadn't even been opened. All of it was unnecessary. All of it was built on a fantasy Alicia kept feeding while I paid the invisible interest. She finally noticed. Stormed into the room, hands on her hips, wild-eyed. "What are you doing? You're ruining everything." I didn't look up. "Everything was already ruined," I said. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." She opened her mouth to argue, but I was already sealing the last box. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my boundaries, my dignity. And this time, I wasn't leaving anything behind, not even the receipts. I didn't burn anything on my way out. No dramatic fight, no suitcase throwing, no "you'll regret this" shouting match. Just a single duffel bag, a worn photo, frame, and a decision I should have made a long time ago. The silence in that condo echoed louder than any argument could. Alicia stood in the hallway, stunned that I was actually leaving, not threatening. Leaving. I walked past her without a word, and she didn't follow. I called my childhood friend Marcus, the kind of friend you don't talk to for months but who always answers when it counts. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just said, "I got a spare room and a bottle of the cheap whiskey your mom used to hate." That night, I sat on a couch that smelled like old flannel and Sunday football, staring at the photo of my mom smiling in that frame, like she knew I'd find my way back. Marcus and I talked about nothing and everything. About high school, about his new job, about how my mom used to drop off her apple pie in aluminum trays that never made it past the first hour. I slept for 10 hours straight. No teeth grinding. No midnight wake-ups filled with dread. Just rest, honest, healing, overdue rest. When I woke up, my phone was flooded. Alicia had gone through every phase, furious at first. "How dare you walk out like that?" Then pleading, "Can we talk? I didn't mean for any of this." Then guilt-tripping. "You're throwing away our marriage over stuff?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed space, and this time, I wasn't asking for permission to take it, because I hadn't just walked away from her. I'd walked back to myself, and I wasn't ready to let her find me. A few days after I left, I drove out to the edge of the city, to the old house my mom left behind. It had been sitting quiet for years, half rented, half forgotten. I still had keys. The place creaked like it remembered me. Dust had settled thick on the shelves, but nothing felt cold. It felt like home, waiting patiently for me to come back and notice it again. In the attic, I found the boxes Alicia never wanted me to bring to the condo. Said they were depressing. Said they didn't match the aesthetic. Inside them, I found pieces of myself. My mom's handmade quilts, still smelling faintly of lavender. A tin box filled with index cards in her handwriting. Recipes she used to make by feel, but wrote down for me because I once told her I'd forget. I sat on the floor, flipping through them, tears coming fast and without warning. Near the bottom, I found the old mixtape she made me when I was 14, Sharpie-written title, "When Life's Too Loud." I didn't even have a tape player anymore, but just holding it. I could hear her humming in the kitchen again. That's when it hit me. How much of who I was had been boxed away, shoved aside to make room for Alicia's glossy, curated world. A world where pain was inconvenient and memory was clutter. I didn't want that world anymore. I rented a small place on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, wood floors, a little garden patch in the back. It smelled like pine and potential. I unpacked my mom's things, laid the quilt across my bed, framed one of her recipe cards and hung it in the kitchen. I started cooking again, slow, intentional meals using her old spice tins. For the first time in years, the grief didn't ache, it didn't choke. Because I wasn't grieving anymore, I was honoring. I thought silence would be the end of it. That walking away with nothing but a duffel and a photo frame would mean she'd finally leave me be. But narcissists don't retreat quietly. They perform, especially when they feel the spotlight slipping. A week after I moved into my new place, a legal notice landed in my inbox. Alicia was suing me for emotional distress and damages related to the returned packages. She claimed I had intentionally sabotaged her well-being by reversing purchases that were meant to bring her joy. Said the act was cruel, calculated, and financially abusive. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I gathered my receipts, screenshots of every charge, every return confirmation, every card statement, with my name at the top. The mediator didn't need long. The case was dismissed within 15 minutes. "You do realize," he said gently to Alicia, "that all of this was purchased under his financial liability." She left the room in silence. No eye contact, no dramatic speech, just the brittle snap of a facade collapsing. 2 days later, she tried another tactic: public sympathy. She posted vague stories about being abandoned by a cold, emotionally unavailable partner who weaponized grief to control the relationship. A few of our mutual friends messaged me privately, confused, then apologetic. One by one, they started removing themselves from her curated feed of luxury and self-pity. But the real punchline came in a message from Damien, yes, the trainer. Short and blunt. "Just so you know, I blocked her. She wouldn't stop showing up at the gym, making scenes. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know the full story. Turns out, the guy she risked our marriage for didn't even want the fallout." And her final move? It wasn't tragic or dangerous. It was pathetic. Because narcissists love the stage, but they crumble when exposed by their own transactions. Some people need confrontation to heal. Others need closure in the form of slamming doors and final words shouted down a hallway. I needed none of that. I needed a pen. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The window was cracked open, and the breeze carried in the scent of soil and rosemary from the little garden I'd started planting. I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight warming my shoulders, coffee in one hand, the photo frame in the other, and I began to write. Not a message to Alicia, a message for me. I wrote about how empty I'd felt in that condo, how I'd slowly become a cardboard version of myself, smiling, nodding, shrinking, swallowing grief like it was shame. I told her she didn't ruin me. She just helped me see what it looked like to be erased. And for that, oddly enough, I thanked her. Not because I owed her kindness, but because I needed to acknowledge the gift in the wreckage. "You hollowed out my life while pretending to fill it," I wrote. But in the silence you left behind, I found myself again. I thanked her for showing me the limits of what I would tolerate, for mocking the very things that made me real, because if she hadn't, I might have never realized how sacred they were. At the end of the letter, I wrote, "You made me feel like memory was a burden, but I've learned it's actually a compass." I folded the letter neatly, like something sacred, slipped it into the back of my mom's photo frame, between the wood and the paper lining. My grief and my clarity pressed together like a message in a bottle. I didn't send it. Some closure doesn't belong in an inbox, it belongs to the soul. Then I stepped outside into the garden, breathed in deep and smiled. I was finally rooted in something real. My life now is quiet, intentionally so. No more echoing rooms filled with things I didn't choose. No more empty glamour or cold countertops that looked good on Instagram but never felt like home. Everything around me now has meaning. The chipped mug I drink my coffee from? It was my mom's. The quilt on my couch. She made it one winter when we couldn't afford heat, and she joked it was stitched with survival. Even the spice rack has her old labels, handwritten, faded, real. I started writing. Just a small blog at first. Mostly for myself, but I used her name as my pen name. I figured if I was going to write about healing, it should come from the part of me she built. I write about grief, about memory, about love that doesn't always look how you expected it to. I post stories about the meals we used to cook, the things she taught me to notice, like how some people say, "I love you" by remembering how you take your tea. To my surprise, people started commenting. telling me my words felt like home, like something they didn't know they were missing. One woman wrote, "This feels like sitting in a warm kitchen with someone who sees me." I think my mom would have smiled at that. I haven't dated since Alicia, but I'm not afraid of love anymore. I'm just finally clear on what it isn't. It's not possession, it's not performance, and it sure as hell isn't someone who mocks the parts of you that are too sacred to explain. Alicia disrespected a dead woman. And now, she's just a footnote in a story that wasn't really about her at all. Because I thought I lost my mother when she died, but I didn't. I just needed to come home to her. And now, finally I have.